Hey guys, welcome to the Erie Side Podcast with your hosts, Elena,
Sophia,
and Dee.
We really appreciate you guys listening, and I hope you're ready to get on the Erie Side. Before we get into the show, we would appreciate it if you could give the podcast a follow and make sure that the bell notification is turned on so you'll be notified whenever we drop an episode. If you enjoy the show, we would love to have you leave us a review, and if there's a case suggestion or any feedback you'd like to share, feel free to send us a message in the text box below, and please remember to follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. Okay, guys, so I have an episode for you guys today, but before we get into it, I do want to give a little warning that this case does include severe abuse of children, so it includes physical torture, sexual assault, and cannibalism. Fair warning. Yeah. So fair warning to everyone out there, listener discretion advised. Before I get into the case, I do want to say that this case does happen in another country, so although I feel it was pretty big when it was like breaking in the news, talked about it, there's not a lot of coverage on it, shockingly. There's a few like details that are reported differently depending on what source you're looking at. So I do include that, but I just want to give out a little warning beforehand. In 2007, in or near Brno, Czech Republic, a shocking discovery was made when the police raided the home of Klara Mauerova. Klara Mauerova, 31 years old, had been abusing her sons, 9-year-old Jakub and 8-year-old Ondrej, for a year, where they were locked in their cellar. They were starved, almost drowned, burned with cigarettes, whipped, and were even forced to cut themselves with knives. When the police entered the house, they discovered Ondrej locked and chained. He was also gagged so he couldn't be heard screaming. His brother Jakub was also found, but it's unclear what state he was found in or where he was. But what's also interesting is a 13-year-old girl claiming to be Anicka was also found. In addition to Anicka, Katerina Mauerova, Klara's sister, was also there, and of course, Klara. Now, there are some reports that there were like 2 to 3 other adults found in the house that were relatives to the sisters, but some reports don't mention that, but I'm gonna still include that. The father of the boys separated from Klara due to issues with her mental illness. It's also important to note that Klara was described in a few sources as being weak, really gullible, and easy to manipulate.
Klara was weak?
Yeah.
And she's the one who's abusing these boys?
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
Now, it's unclear how Klara met Anicka, but at some point they met. Some reports say that Anicka met Klara when Klara was studying for a pedigree, which is a degree in being able to teach others how to teach. And some report that her sister Katerina brought Anicka to Klara. In both reports, Anicka does say that she was like a victim of sex trafficking and had a lot of just horrific abuse happen to her. But at some point they met, but Anicka wasn't really Anicka at all. She actually was a 33 or 34 year old woman named Barbora Skrlova that was suffering from some sort of disease, like a glandular or like hyperpituitism disease, which essentially made her look like a young 13-year-old girl. And Barbara used that to her advantage. Whenever she would get caught by the law, she would often pretend to be a minor in order to get away with it.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, it's unclear if Katerina knew about Anicka actually being Barbara, because I've read some articles saying it's possible, and some saying that she too was manipulated. There are some articles that report that Klara would get text messages that she thought were from some doctor with instructions on how to treat her sons. I say that I put that in quotations because they were really just instructions on how to torture the boys. The doctor claimed that they were infected by evil spirits and need to be disciplined in order to save them.
I'm starting to get a picture in my head of what is going on here.
Yes. But the phone was later discovered by the police belonging to the sister, Katerina.
Katerina?
Katerina, yes. So this is where it's unclear if Katerina knew about Anicka actually being Barbara. There's also some reports that saying Anicka claimed that she was very sick and had all these diseases and leukemia and was going blind and had all these doctor's appointments, but it was reported that only Katerina would bring her to these doctor's appointments.
Interesting.
Yes. So if this is true, with the whole doctor and everything.
It's like Manchester by proxy, but she's doing it to herself, right? And I know there's a term for that, but that's kind of what it sounds like.
Kind of, yeah. This story was what inspired the movie The Orphan.
Oh, I saw that.
Yeah, so this is one of the stories that inspired that movie.
I convinced our grandparents to take me to see that, and I had to use our grandma's hand to cover my eyes in the theater because I was so terrified. I was 13, and I convinced them that it was a good movie to go see, and they were like, we are never going to a movie like that again. And I was so terrified. I was like, 100%, I'm not doing that to you guys again.
You're very good at convincing adults to let you see horror movies.
I did it to them twice, and that was the last time.
Yeah. So if this is true with the text messages from the doctor and everything, then yeah, she is very easy to manipulate. And I can see that Klara is very, very gullible. But nevertheless, Barbara did manipulate and convince Klara and Katerina to horrifically abuse the boys for religious reasons, as the three girls had recently joined a cult called the Grail Movement.
The what movement?
The Grail Movement.
And Katerina's in this group, Anicka / Barbara and Klara?
Correct. And it is also reported that Anicka's father was part of this movement, but like I said, some sources mention that, some don't. Take that as you will. In addition to the abuse I mentioned earlier, they were also sexually assaulted and then for days forced to stand in their own urine, and poor Ondrej was skinned, and the sisters are believed to have eaten it.
Oh my God.
And even reports say that they forced him to eat it as well.
Oh.
Wait. Who was sexually abused?
The boys.
By whom?
The sisters.
Klara and Katerina.
Yes. Or at least if there were other adults there, by those adults. It's not clear who sexually assaulted them or what they did.
Is that their parents?
It's their mom and aunt.
Okay, so they sexually abused these boys.
Mm-hmm.
How did they skin them without bleeding?
They were in a cellar and they were locked and they were chained. They were, tied behind their backs. They were chained in cages. They skinned
the whole body or just pieces?
No, just a part of, I believe it was their leg.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
That's so psychopathic, so disgusting, pure evil right there.
Yeah.
Are they unbalanced individuals?
Well,
have they been tested for that?
I did see a report that said that Klara did have some diagnosed mental illness. It didn't say what it was, but her husband did leave her because of some mental health issues.
I know they said she's very gullible, but even people who are mentally disabled doesn't make them unaware of like kindness versus cruelty.
Right. And what's really interesting is before all of this and before Anicka or Anicka, depending, but she was reported as being an amazing mother. Very loving.
Klara?
Very
before Anicka?
Right. Very loving, very caring to her kids, very involved.
Starting to wonder if she was brainwashed herself.
And yeah, that's definitely
that makes sense why the dad left and was okay with her taking care of the kids.
Right.
Yeah. But now, how does all of this get discovered is actually really interesting, because I've mentioned that the Czech police raided their home, but how do they know about them? How do they know to go to this home? Well, one of the neighbors recently had a newborn baby and had a baby monitor to watch his child when it actually picked up signals from a monitor in Klara's house, because she was monitoring one of the boys. She had put up a baby monitor to watch all the horrific acts that was going on. The neighbor saw a little boy naked and chained. He immediately called the police, and the police were able to figure out which house it was coming from.
I can't imagine being the one to see that. I would lose my mind. Because I'd also feel like, oh my God, there's this monster living amongst us. Like, not only is that child in danger, but like the baby's in danger.
Yeah, I mean, imagine just going to look at your monitor, hoping to see like your newborn baby, and then all of a sudden you see a little boy chained.
Jump scare. I would get so freaked out.
Yeah, I would feel like it was picking up something from like a horror movie.
I would honestly feel like I might be being pranked or something.
It's just terrifying to imagine. Unfortunately, when the police entered the home, they believed Barbora when she claimed that she was Anicka, a 13-year-old girl. The brothers and Barbora were sent somewhere safe.
Oh my gosh, that is so scary.
Yeah.
That's like what you see in like a movie, like
Right.
where nobody has caught on yet. So like,
Right.
oh
Yeah.
my gosh, that is the most dangerous individual right there. I feel
Right.
like.
Right.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, essentially she was the one that was manipulating and convincing them to torture the boys.
Oh no.
Because a lot of the time she would push things or break things and she would blame it on the boys to encourage and continue the torture that those boys endured.
So where were they all staying now? Like in a home together?
Yeah, it's not clear. I'm assuming it's some sort of children's home, but it wasn't long before Anicka just dipped and she left the country completely because she knew.
Better than her staying there and
Right.
continuing to hurt them.
Right.
They probably thought they had just rescued these boys and they know they
right.
were. Oh my gosh.
Exactly. It was after that they were sent there that it was discovered that Anicka was a 33-year-old woman who orchestrated the abuse of these two innocent boys. But by the time the police had a chance to get to her, like I said, she fled the country, going to Norway.
How did they discover who she was, like her real identity and her real age?
I'm actually not 100% sure. I think it was after talking with Klara and Katerina and maybe going into some past police reports maybe of like her using this as an excuse to get away with everything. But nevertheless, they did discover that. And by the time that the police got there, she had already fled to Norway. She picked up old habits, but this time pretending to be a 13-year-old boy named Adam.
Wow.
Yes, and she even got surgery in order to make herself look more like a boy. She got liposuction, breast reduction. She was actually in some sort of orphan thing for children, and then eventually she got adopted.
Oh my gosh. I feel like also now I'm getting reminded that there was a true story behind the movie Orphan, and it was this, which is so scary to think she's just been adopted by a family.
Mm-hmm. And
does this family think they're adopting somebody who was in need? Oh my gosh, yes. Just like the movie.
she was pretending to be a boy for a while, and she was afraid that because Barbora Skrlova was considered a person that had fled and that they needed to arrest, so she started to fear that they would find her. So she ran away from the family. And because the family thought that their little boy was missing, they had put out like a missing.
Oh, right. Because it's the
Right. And that's actually what allowed the police to find her.
Wait a second. How old was Barbara pretending to be a boy?
I think like 12.
So the parents never got to see whether he had the right kind of genitals?
I don't
Yeah,
think
I
that's a
don't-
little too old.
But you take him to the doctor every year. And the doctor checks.
Maybe they didn't take them to the doctor.
I don't know. I think she was just very good at manipulating and getting away. She wasn't even with that family for more than a year. So I don't know if they were like left before like a yearly checkup or something like that. But it wasn't for, like I said, like 8 months until the police had found her and finally arrested her.
How did they know to search? How did they know that this missing boy was actually Anicka? Were they? Yeah, I'm just curious about that.
I think they were able to figure it out because they probably knew that she was going to go back to her old tricks and pretend to be some young kid. And then some 8-year-old boy shows up that there's no record of him previous to all this. And suddenly he shows up and then disappears. So I think that's how they were able to figure that out.
This reminds me of the case of Natalia Grace. Do you remember that?
Mm-mm.
I think this happened, I could be wrong, in Canada, where this woman or girl, it's really debated, got adopted by that family.
Yes, I do know. That's actually the other story that Orphan was also based off of, I think.
Okay, interesting.
I think it was based off of that story and this one as well.
Maybe, because I feel like this one might have happened right after Orphan.
Oh, maybe not then.
I'm not sure, but Natalia was a Ukrainian orphan with a rare case of dwarfism. And so her former adoptive parents, actually Michael and Christine Barnett, were charged with multiple counts of neglecting a dependent. And so they claimed that she was this adult who was doing terrible things. And then they had her basically kicked her out and told her you need to live on her own. She claims she was a child and that's not true, and that they just forced her to move out and she was a child. So essentially like child neglect by forcing a child to live on their own. So it was this whole thing, and yeah, it just reminded me of that.
And when I was doing research and I thought about that case, obviously, I think this almost like the opposite of that case, where instead of the parents thought that the kid was actually an adult, the kid was an adult and was manipulating the parents this whole time. So it's interesting to see those two different cases and two different sides. So now that all of them had been arrested, they all blamed each other for what happened. Barbara blames the sisters, claiming that she was innocent and that they tortured her, but the court obviously didn't believe her. Klara admitted what she had done to her children, but claimed that she was manipulated by Barbara and Katerina. Klara actually never denied what had happened to her kids and the horrific torture that endured, but she did blame Barbara and her sister and claimed that she was just manipulated. In 2008, the court found Barbora Skrlova guilty of orchestrating the abuse of Jakub and Ondrej Mauerova. Barbara was only sentenced to 5 years in prison. Klara, however, got 9 years, and Katerina got 10. As of right now, all of them have been released, with Barbara only serving half of her sentence.
That woman is dangerous, in my opinion.
Yeah. And like I said, it's also worth noting that it's reported that Barbara's father was a part of the cult, the Grail movement cult, and it's supposedly this really big cult that's in multiple different countries, and that he was in the version that was in the Czech Republic. It could have also been that Barbara used the cult to create this idea that the boys were evil and that you would get into heaven if you did good things and if you did good deeds. But what's interesting is that's the exact opposite of what they did. Instead, they tortured 2 little boys, forcing them to live in filth, chained, starved, beaten, and were forced to possibly eat their own skin.
I have a few questions.
Go ahead. Do you want me to send the pictures of what they look like?
I do.
I'll send them.
Need to see all this. Have you heard about what has happened to Barbara since? What is going on with her?
She's just living a quiet life. She's staying out of the public light. I think Barbara did suffer from mental illness herself, and I think that's part of the reason why she got out so early. I did see a report that she was released due to like mental health. I saw another report where she claimed that she had DID, which is dissociative identity disorder, which is essentially that she had multiple personalities, but the court did not, from what I saw, did not believe her or listen to her or her claims.
What do you know about this cult?
I don't know much. It's not like a super popular cult, but it's a relatively new one. I think it started in like the 1940s.
Some people seem to think of it as a religion, and some people claim it's a cult.
In this case, it was always described as a cult, but I think it is kind of depending on who you ask.
It is. It's originated in Germany.
In the 40s. Since then, it has spread to different countries, like I said, like the Czech Republic. I would say in this case, I would consider it a cult since it was used in this case to torture those 2 boys. I sent you the pictures, and I can send you a picture of what I believe was what the guy saw on the baby monitor. I believe this is like one of the things. And it's also worth mentioning that when he was looking at the baby monitor, he did see a hand come in to feed the child.
Oh my gosh. First of all, it's hard to see. It's just spooky seeing the face of this child. It's hard to see if anything's going on.
But you can kind of clearly see that he's like
his
tied
arm,
behind his back.
Yeah, his arm is like held at an odd position, which is what makes you think there's something.
Right. And that's just like a clip from like a screenshot from the video. But in the actual video, I can't see the video, but when the guy was watching it, he saw this little boy chained and kind of like moving around a bit, and eventually a hand would come out and feed the boy, which is where he was able to get food.
Also, Barbara is so scary.
Mm-hmm.
Her eyes are completely dead. They're chilling.
Yeah.
You take one look at her and you can tell pure evil.
Mm-hmm.
And I can definitely see how she has this face where she could be 13 or 30.
Exactly. And that's why I think that's how she was able to get away with it for so long. And
But
I'll send you.
It's her eyes that really I cannot take.
Yeah, they're kind of freaky. And what's interesting is I'm sending you some pictures of Klara when she was like initially arrested. She doesn't seem to me like an evil person. She seemed like she would be a nice mom, which is so crazy to think.
She looks like she's nice, but so it's weird that all this happened.
So it's crazy to look at her and know like all the horrific things that she did. Yeah, that's the case I have for you guys. Thoughts? Mom, do you have any thoughts? Any last minute thoughts?
The story is very weird. The family looks normal. I don't know what Barbara is supposed to look like. She looks like a female to me. I don't know if she was very short or something. I don't get it.
Yeah, she had a disease that made her look like a child.
In the picture, she doesn't look like a child. So I just don't understand how nobody figured that out.
Even the kayak picture, didn't she look kind of like childish?
I can see her maybe looking like a child.
Or do you think part of the reason why she was able to get away with it was because Klara was just so easily manipulated?
I can't tell in the kayak picture, but when they show her later on when she's arrested, she definitely looks like a full-grown woman.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. She's a little short here, but I can't tell, really. I guess she could look like her daughter. I don't know. And how did she even adopt her? I don't understand.
Well, and that's definitely something that was like probably wouldn't have happened with someone who wasn't suffering from mental illness, but I think Klara just felt so bad for her that she just took her in.
From where? Took her in from where?
That's the thing is Barbara kind of showed up out of nowhere. And one report is Barbara went up to Klara, said, hey, I've been trafficked, all this stuff. Please, can you care for me? And another report is Katerina brought Barbara into the house and introduced them. But so there's different reports, but essentially she came into their lives and was living with them because Klara, Katerina, and Barbara and the two boys were all living in the same house. So they were living with her, and eventually Klara was going to adopt Anicka as her own, or I think she was just about to, and then that's when the police discovered all the horrors going on in the house.
Yeah, it's just really weird.
Mm-hmm. It is weird.
Situation.
And I think that's why something like this only happened with Klara and her families, because she seems like she would be very easy to manipulate because she didn't even question things like, why is this random girl not wanting to go to the police? Things like this, claiming all this abuse, and just kind of popped out of nowhere. As most people would question it, I think she was just so easy to manipulate. She just went along with it.
Is Barbara's parents around or something? Her father?
Her father was reported of being part of the cult. I haven't heard anything besides that.
Was he part of the cult where they were living or somewhere else?
I think it was somewhere else. If that's true, then I think most likely Barbara introduced the girls into the cult as a way of gaining control of the family and being able to use that as an excuse to abuse the children and use the religious reasons, like the boys being possessed by evil spirits, as a way to abuse and gain control of the family.
So Barbara just shows up out of nowhere and the other woman says, let me adopt you?
Yep. And that's what's so weird about this case, is that whatever Klara suffered from, it also is worth mentioning that Klara believed that her sister and her, that they both believed that they were destined to fulfill this mission in their lives for God. It's unclear what that mission was. I think they were already pretty religious to begin with, and then when they were introduced with the cult, they just ran with it, and that was Barbara's opening to use that religion in order to manipulate them into harming their sons.
And Barbara's father had no role in this?
There's not much research on that. I read one article saying that they have no idea where his whereabouts are. Some articles don't even mention her father, so it could just be speculation and he wasn't involved, or he was, and that's how Barbara knew of the cult and used that.
So Barbara then pretended to be Adam? Is that correct?
Yes, after she escaped, she pretended to be a boy to get adopted again.
Adam looks from the Addams family was Uncle Fester.
Oh, yeah, I can see that.
And I don't even think that looks like a 12-year-old boy, do you?
No.
No, that looks like actually like an older man in some ways.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
He's completely bald.
Yeah, I mean, completely bald. And then they don't ask why he's bald?
When she was in these homes, she still pretended that she had a lot of like illnesses going on.
Okay, hold on. They have a lot of illnesses. They go see doctors. None of the doctors realize that it's a female.
Yeah, it's very, very weird.
I mean, do these doctors not check these children?
Did they even take them to the doctors?
Adam obviously has illnesses.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't he go to the doctor? You run a blood test, a urine test, it's going to come back female.
Yeah.
I don't understand.
I don't understand it either. And I think that's why this is such a strange story to wrap your head around, and why I think so many people kind of gravitate to the stories, because there's so many things they're just like, how did we get here?
I'm really curious about Barbara's childhood and background. Now, we probably don't know that, but
yeah.
I mean, it's so evil. I want to know what, if anything, happened while she was growing up. I mean, to cut somebody's skin and then eat it and then force them to eat it, it's vile.
Yeah, I mean, there's also reports that shock therapy was used. If they had thrown up, I saw a report that they were forced to eat their own throw up. They were just found in feces and throw up and urine, and they were just found in horrific, or at least Ondrej was found in very horrific conditions, placed in dog cages and stuff like that.
Where are the boys today, if we know at all? Are they doing all right?
We don't know anything about them or what they look like or where they are. We know that they were put into some safe place. They were actually adopted by their own dad later on.
Makes sense.
Yeah, so he came into the situation and he took them. And from what I know, they're doing good. There's no info on where they are or what they look like or anything like that, obviously for their own privacy. But yes, they're with their father and they're safe.
I hope they are doing well and have been able to live as much of a normal and healthy life as possible, given their trauma.
Yeah, it's unbelievable that in addition to all of this, to be skinned and then just to see your family eat your own skin and then later be forced to eat it yourself is just something that I just can't grasp my mind around. That's just unbelievable.
And also, if their mother treated them well before this Anicka character came in, obviously it's a complete betrayal to be treated like that from your parent regardless, but I think it would be a complete
180 for the
mind twist and just for them to deal with, to be, how did my mother go from that to this?
Right.
And I think it would be difficult to trust people going forward.
Oh, for sure.
If she had treated them well before, which there are accounts she was a good mother, how do you not know that who the person who's treating you well now is not going to do a 180 like she did to them, you know?
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, it's crazy to imagine like just living a perfect life, or a pretty good life for like 8-9 years, then all of a sudden you're trapped in a cellar, chained behind your back. It's unimaginable, really, and it's horrific. But I'm glad that we were able to bring light to the situation. And it's kind of bittersweet because they did get justice, and the Klara, Katerina, and Barbara were arrested, but they didn't get that long for all the horrific acts, and they were all released and on parole.
I just think Barbara obviously must have been, I mean, she is sick, but could have been she went through some abuse in her childhood to do what she's doing.
Most likely.
Yeah. I think she definitely had some mental issues, and that's essentially, I read, like I said, a report that she was released from prison due to mental issues.
Should she be put in like a hospital?
You would think. But
I mean, she's sick. There is something.
There's definitely something to
definitely
be able,
did not get enough.
Yeah, and
because like it's not to do time for what she did, but also she's a danger to society, in my opinion.
It's just unbelievable how little all of them got, and how they all just get to go about their own lives after they've just destroyed the innocence of those two boys. But yeah, she's apparently just living her life, keeping quiet. And I would say the same with Klara and Katerina. But yeah, that's my story for this week.
It just seems Katerina knew that Barbora was a woman.
Yeah.
She wasn't hiding that from Katerina. She was not hiding her gender at that point, or her sex.
Correct, but she was hiding other things. Didn't Katerina at some point say,
Well, that's the thing is it's reported that Katerina knew, possibly. And that's why Klara was able to be able to believe this, is because Katerina would take Barbara to all of her doctor's appointments and everything like that. So Klara never got to see the results of that, or if they even went to all these doctor's appointments, because she claimed that she was, sick with all these things when she wasn't.
So Katerina
Most likely
is probably sick too.
Mm-hmm.
Or some kind of disorder.
Klara was sentenced to 9 years and Katerina was sentenced to 10 years. I think it's very likely that Katerina knew about Barbara at some point. Either she knew about it from the beginning or she later discovered it. I don't know, but I think she did know.
What's interesting is obviously it doesn't take much to tip the scale to go from being a great mother to an abusive individual. I do understand that she has some mental disorder. However, that one individual tipped it so much is unbelievable.
Yeah. It's crazy how someone can go from what seemed like a very loving mother to just a monster.
Well, and I'm not saying much of it was influenced by the cult, because I don't know, but
yeah,
think about it. Like, people are influenced to do negative things all the time, whether it be in cults or you're brainwashed or women brought into certain organizations either by trafficked or by their boyfriends, and they start doing things they never would have done previously.
It's hard to imagine someone doing this, someone convincing someone else to do this at all, let alone someone convincing someone to do this to their own children. It's just really hard for me to wrap my head around.
I get the sense that Anicka did not have to do too much work for Klara to do. I think she was much more easily manipulated and manipulated than a lot of other individuals.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. That is the horrific case of Klara Mauerova, Katerina Mauerova, and Barbora Skrlova. Well, thank you guys for coming in and letting me do this case. And thank you to all the listeners out there. I hope you enjoyed this case. It's definitely a lot and a little bit weirder than that we've done in the past. But it's just a weird case, I feel like, in general. But that's it. Thank you guys for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed this, and we'll see you next time. And remember to stay on the eerie side. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye. And be safe.